Well, I couldn't be more happy than to invite Brian Zakem onto the show today. Brian and I have a history. We've only been in the same place at the same time once, and that was at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago in the summer of 2023. And we've been trying to get together ever since, and with phone calls and emails and text messages and that. And it's been mostly on me that none of those conversations have uh, come to completion. So we finally are able to get at least virtually in the same place at the same time. So Brian, thank you for making the time and thanks for joining us.
Yes, you're most welcome.
So the thing with Brian is there's so many interesting things to talk about. Whatever we do talk about, we're going to be doing several other things a disservice because his heart and his interests and his experience has such a broad range. But there's two things I really want to get Brian's wisdom from. The first one is his work with sustainability and the environment. And the other is I want to hear his thoughts about what's going on with the anti-Semitism in the country. And we can leave that towards the end if you'd like, Brian. But I want to just ask you, could you give the folks who are watching or listening right now an overview of what the issue is that you're wrestling with and how it is you've been approaching it?
I think the consensus in the circles that I'm familiar with and the folks that are partners with us is reducing our carbon footprint. I'm sure this is not new to your listeners. Of course, there's so many aspects in so many ways, from household choices and habits to how we work together in our communities, how we bring in a variety of community organizations, groups, all the way to the state and national and beyond. But I think this notion of sustainability, which I have on pretty good authority, is really straightforward. That how are we going to find better and better ways to, with our knowledge, our science findings, going to reduce the damaging effects of our consumption, and this on all different levels. And we all have a responsibility and stake to be, in my opinion, knowledgeable and take in the new data that comes in. Some of it quite serious and quite alarming, more than quite alarming, very, very alarming. So with that in mind, this interest started way back in undergraduate school, and I have followed it in different ways. Now as a retired person in Minneapolis for 7 years, previously living in Chicago and grew up in Cincinnati. This sort of illustrates that the ability for us to do measurable, effective, collaborative change, because collaborative I need to underline and put in red, so use your imagination, is so important with the boundaries that I've either lived in, visited in, but primarily Midwest residency with involvements other places. What's important is that boundaries can't get in the way of doing work of cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner ways to disinfect, cleaner ways to fertilize, and it goes on and on. If
Brian, excuse me, when you say boundaries, do you mean geographical boundaries? Do you mean mental boundaries or organizational boundaries?
I thank you for that. It's, I think, on all those levels.
Yeah.
And it has to be taken in when the work is engaged with your colleagues and collaborators. Currently, I'm on a board of a small not-for-profit called Alliance for Sustainability. And from that and other things, I've been involved in my congregation's Sustainability and Climate Action Working Group.
Hmm.
No offense to people that like the word committee or commission, but working group seems more straightforward. And
Yeah.
if we're not doing the work, there really, in my view, isn't a reason to be getting together and putting the time and energy in.
Well, thank you.
That,
Well said.
that aside,
Yeah.
we our group is making some measurable
Hmm.
headways,
Hmm.
both in the culture of the congregation and in leaders that are getting support for the work they do outside.
Can I drill down on that a little bit, Brian? Because that's where the rubber meets the road. The working group has identified, I imagine, some leverage points that they have that they want to do, efforts towards. And then so there's identifying what the problem is that you can do something about, coming up with a plan, and then selling it. And in your case, to your own congregation, right? Can you walk us through the steps that the Alliance has done to try to think those things through?
The Alliance has been around for 40 years. I've only been active in it little shy of 7.
Mm,
What I know from the institutional history tellers and the written documentation
mm,
is, exactly as you described the steps. Um, there's been a collaboration not only with scientists and sustainability oriented professionals, volunteers, and the religious community. It's important that there is a big component of membership and leadership that has come out of congregational membership because the values are very likely to be aligned.
mhm,
And from the identification and from the deep involvement, like of the University of Minnesota as a resource and many others, not
mm,
just in the state, um, we've identified certain things, and then we just sort of look at how many volunteers are active, how many are occasional, all of those realities. So I
mm,
don't want to glorify this difficult work. There
mm,
is a lot of steps of the human resource, the financial resource,
mhm,
and the leadership that are willing to share. But what we've been able to do is we
mm,
built a lot more sharing collaboration in the last quite a few years.
mm,
And therefore, some of the stuff on PFAS, the state has one of the most, how to say, credibly impactful, healthy PFAS about going forward of these forever chemicals that
So let's let me back you up then. I'd like to know more about that. Excuse me. The initiative is about these forever chemicals, and you called them.
one of them. Yes, thank you.
Mhm. And just can you explain the jargon for that again?
I wish I had the acronym. I, I
Mm.
I get stuck on decoding all the acronyms. You think I was functioning in Washington, D.C., but I'm not. Uh, these are these chemicals that were on non-stick fry pans and
Right.
all kinds of that had practical consumer
Mhm.
um, attractive characteristics for
Mhm.
products.
Mhm.
And of course, what we've learned is many of these stay in the soil, stay in our body,
Mhm.
and actually have some mild to significant toxic effects. And
Mhm.
the science has gathered more and more of that evidence. So what's occurred in that one instance is a public educational campaign
Okay.
bringing together members of congregations and
Mhm.
then working with legislators to determine public health that are public health oriented. And
So now that's a book right there. So I want to respect what you just said and drill into it a little bit more.
sure,
There's that Steve Martin book or joke. He said, I wrote a book. It's 3 things to do with $1 million. Step 1, get $1 million, right? So this, going from picking this topic to coming up with a plan and then reaching out to you said congregations. What congregations? How did you do that? What were the problems in doing that? How did you overcome them?
Well, let me break this in two pieces for honest representation.
Hmm.
The Alliance was involved as a supportive ally.
Hmm.
This formal initiative
Hmm.
came from another not-for-profit
Hmm.
that we have a cordial relationship,
I
not
see.
only with leadership.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand, since it's passed, we have worked with that organization that spearheaded it
Hmm.
to incorporate it in some of the educational things that are innovative for the Alliance for Sustainability in a program that our interns named AKEPA. I never heard of the term AKEPA. John, I wonder if you have. It's an
Oh.
endangered species bird
Ah.
that the interns, in their own wisdom and attention, when the naming came about, recommended, and it has become the name of our
Hmm.
educational program. There's a component in there to introduce elementary and high school students as one of many elements in the AKEPA learning of what PFAS are, the history, the current origin,
Hmm.
the change in public policy,
Wow.
and the importance for them to continue being watchdogs. And, once the legislation is impacted, one has to have the data to show the reduction in the
Right.
toxic
Right.
effects. So we're looking at long-term
Hmm.
relationship
Hmm.
within the youth. And I think that's the strength of the Alliance for Sustainability, because we've all acknowledged without bringing the youth into it in their own
Yeah.
way, with their own critical thinking, their own passion, their own idealism, this work is going to spin even more out of control than it
Yeah.
has.
So Brian, again, I'm thinking partly in terms of methods that people who are interested in like initiating something in their own community or
Sure.
their own resources to help them think through organizational steps and conceptual frameworks. So it sounds like you decided, or the group decided, that all right, education's critical. And so let's focus on what there's our congregation, there's other congregations, and within those congregations, there's youth in particular. And if we wanted to have a very specific action, it would be developing educational materials for youth, something like that.
I think that's a good overview. Absolutely.
Uh, and then
And
who
yes, well,
organized the curriculum then,
in the Alliance, we have working subgroups,
Mhm.
and our interns who have applied from all over. We've had several international interns also applied, um, have worked on that educational committee.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's what that organization calls it. Okay. And what's evolved is draft after draft.
Mhm.
Now it's beyond the initial program. And then we work to identify with the leaders and the teachers and the administrators an ongoing sustainability group within the school, because
Mm.
we're trying to get out of these one-offs where on the
Yeah,
one hand
yeah.
we engage, on the second we work to nurture. So here we get to the deep part that you and I have talked in the mental health field, is how do we develop the trust,
Mm.
bring the knowledge within that work that we want to pursue and explore together.
Mm.
So we have the element of the relationship, and quite a few of our interns, matter of fact, 3 or 4 of them have now joined our board.
Wow.
So and these are frequent, like the development committee meeting that I'm on later today. is weekly. Our board is about every 6 weeks. Our executive group about once a month. On top of it, there is a lot of communication because when you're getting into the science and the proposal end, you have to have review and you have to build consensus. And of
Right.
course, when there's difficulties and conflicts,
Mhm.
we have enough of this
Yeah.
commitment to
Yep.
participate by wrestling with it. So I
Mhm.
think that's key in whatever we do.
Yeah.
These conflicts, these relationships, these respectful, dignified approaches have to be hung in there. And we really work with each other to be
Mhm.
honest about our biases
Mhm.
versus another source until we feel like this is good enough for now. Let's
Yeah.
put it in play. Let's evaluate the impact. And if we went off track, let's deal with it in the next response to, the problem that this
Mhm.
collaborative group is dealing with.
So, Brian, this is really helpful. I'm just where my mind goes in two different directions with what you've just said. On the one hand, what you said earlier about the value of working with the congregation because there's shared values. And in this case, I want to ask you in a second to talk about those values
Okay.
and how it is they reached across various denominations or whatever. But on the other end, I've tried to working with schools is enormously difficult because of regulations and school boards, and to design curricula for a school is a big deal. So how did you navigate that? So you can take either one. I don't mean to throw a bomb at you or two bombs, but I kind of I'm interested in the product that you've created, but also how you got there.
I start off with the word difficult.
Yeah.
One thing about our alliance is we try to be excruciatingly honest and transparent.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the things I value
mm,
because I'm sure you have had experiences, as I have, of a lot of well-meaning groups'
mm,
mission on paper when it gets into the actual power issues
right.
and other dynamics. It's often difficult to be
Mm,
heard in the way we're asking folks in healing, healing work of this new
mm,
initiative, this new part of the movement under this time for healing the heart of America.
mm,
Healing the heart is only as powerful as it leads us to the commitment to be in the world and take risk
mm,
and
mm.
be honest.
Interesting. Well said.
So I think one thing you don't know, I entered a meditation group about, uh,
Mm,
I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, and
mm,
I've never done that before. And
mm,
this whole notion of looking at the heart, where people in mental health are usually looking
mm,
at all kinds of things, behavior, affect, et
mhm,
cetera, et cetera. So this notion of heart, I was not skeptical, I was just
mm,
ignorant to focus on, is this really separate
mm,
from our neurobiological apparatus?
mm,
And if it isn't, how is it somewhat distinct in the way we usually look at mental health?
mm, mhm,
And I have to say, it's been revelatory because I think at the time of how much one can ignore that piece of spirit. And I think this is where the spiritual comes in. So
mm,
heart becomes a metaphor of the spirit, however you conceive
mm,
spirit within whatever tradition. So when there are these relationships that you come in with a powerful concern
mm,
and you're open to explore together, I think what comes out of it is a kind of creativity.
mm,
And so dealing with schools to sort of ground it a bit
mm.
hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
The interns have learned that. There's a lot of learning that happens. We have learned a lot, but little by little, we have gotten support from some larger not-for-profits
Mm,
and some school systems that we have connections with and now we're even exploring beyond.
mm,
And I think it's a matter of, it's got to be real, it's got to be well presented and clear, and you have to be available for the time and space
yeah.
to respond to the particulars of the program and
Mm,
deal with any well-worn skepticism of administrators and
mm,
teachers. You know, like the question is, who are you to offer something that we're not doing?
mm. Right.
And so I don't want to simplify it. And
Yeah.
I don't want the listener to think this came about without
Right.
a,
Without struggle.
a
Yeah.
lot of struggle.
So, Brian, is this like the creation of a curriculum in the or the creation of an educational material that's implemented in the curriculum, or is it done as an after-school program?
It's within the school day,
It is.
okay, and it isn't huge.
Mm-hmm.
The initial engaging
Mm-hmm.
piece, but the idea is that we're here as facilitators and listeners
Mm-hmm.
and supporters and problem solvers as it wends its way into that school's culture. Our vision,
Mm-hmm.
and we have people with all different levels of how you deal with existing norms and values of a school culture or of a community.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we're here sort of as an external, not only educators and having young interns conduct it for role modeling, but more importantly is picking up and building more
Mm-hmm.
community,
Yeah.
which makes this important enough that it becomes, uh, how to say, really part of their life going forward as they
Mm-hmm.
get to upper high school, college, etc.
All right, so now that's another phase of questions that you've just raised in my mind. One is what you just said about community. Um, I'd be interested to know how that, as best you can recall, how the connection with the school was nurtured. But the other thing has to do with the actual creation of the material. I can think of at least three groups. There's the teachers,
Yes.
there's your group, and then there's the kids who are winding up as interns. I guess that another group would be the school board. So
So
how?
far, we've not had to wrestle with that openly. I'm
Hmm,
sure it's in the background of
hmm,
the administrators and teachers.
hmm,
We haven't had that as either a guardrail, I mean, an impasse or
hmm.
a difficulty.
Okay,
But
good.
but to deny that it isn't there is not being realistic.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so how you're right. I agree with you. You've got to like have a community. I liken it to like a bowl. You know, if you want to have soup, you got to have a bowl first,
Yes.
and that's the relationship. That's the trust you have with each other. That's the common values you have with each other. Maybe common methods of problem solving. That's the bowl that holds the process of trying to come up with this. Curriculum, for instance. What can you say about how that evolved?
Well, I really think the core, at least our belief, and
Mhm.
I'm happy if someone sees something that we've missed, because we all have biases of what makes things work or not work or get stuck. But particular, there's a fantastic network
Hmm.
of leaders on our board and
Hmm.
our a couple dream teams that
Hmm.
have been in this field and know a great deal of
Okay.
movers and shakers in the
Mhm.
state. I've worked on the City of Minnesota Advisory Council,
Mhm. Mhm.
been involved that way, and many others in many other ways. What's important is people came on here saying, I think together we've learned enough,
Hmm.
we can do more. And of course, the more that I think the honest sharing and caring and the projects we've done that weren't so doable
Hmm.
being in those silos,
Hmm.
but this broader group. For example, one of the groups that has been very helpful is Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. The Power
Hmm.
and Light are organizations throughout the country. They have
Oh,
chapters everywhere.
huh.
And then I had a friend through a cousin who got involved in the one in Iowa. So I
Hmm.
reached out to him, and now we're talking about, well, maybe we can find linkage through the upper Midwest.
Hmm.
Okay. So there's been a lot of those kinds of networkings.
Hmm.
We do have some really fine networkers. We
Hmm.
might overdose on networking in our,
Hmm.
but because it produces so many possibilities, then we,
Right.
I was just in a discussion with the Environmental Defense Fund last week and the world, face to face, they were coming through for one issue or another, and we're exploring.
Hmm.
But the notion is, here's what we've done. I've looked at what you've done. Is there a way to even do what we do better? Then it goes back to respect us. Then the conversation, but it only continues because there's a identification of whoever's involved that there's something here to share that
Hmm.
can make a difference with people that really are into the work.
So, how in that iterative process back and forth, how involved are the interns, the kids in the school?
It varies depending on now they do have in this agreement to be interns, certain specific obligations, requirements. Some have been more involved than others. Some have actually been more involved after they ended the
Yeah,
formal and went on our board.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's all over the map. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not like a corporation.
Right.
It's very clear and on
Yeah.
the checklist, and
Very
otherwise
organic.
you got it. It's very
Yeah.
organic,
Yeah.
which is not always easy. Okay,
Yeah.
who picked up on this? And yeah, but we track it. We track it. Yeah, it is very organic.
So is there like an executive team of people from the
Yes,
school, people from the organization, and that meet regularly, or
yes.
uh, how does that work?
I think overall, the years and relationships, I think the way it works is sort of like already, touched on. Um, we bring a lot of commitment to the wins and the frustrations and the workarounds.
Hmm.
So we don't lose a commitment even when there's big log jams or failures.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, like we all know, sometimes failures lead us to a more in-depth understanding of
Right.
how to move it forward.
Yep.
So I think the perseverance, if I had to pick one word, John,
Hmm.
is perseverance.
Perseverance. Yeah. And well, yeah, and that goes back to your commitment to the values, right?
I agree.
If you're really committed to the value, then you persevere. Okay. Now let's widen the scope a little bit and talk about impact. Um, when you have this kind of iterative process, it's hard to measure impact because it's happening on so many different levels. It's
Yes.
the kids are learning about organization. They're learning about the issue itself with these chemicals. They're learning about the cost to their lives and their future. They're learning how to organize, to intervene. They're learning about legislatures and community organizations. So there's personal learning, there's social learning, there's organizational learning. So with all that happening, what can you say are some of the things that have been the outcome of this work?
Well, I'd say, let's see how I can define it the time I've been on the board. Um, there's been, um, besides the beginning of the, integration of the Zakepa youth program,
Hmm.
and it hasn't been huge, and I want to be sure, but we have begun it. It has occurred in schools, and we have some more prospects coming down the road probably will get integrated, some this summer and more of them in the fall. I think what's been learned is the um, the the work itself, and quite a few of the interns, on one hand, had decided they were going to go into the field, had an inkling they were interested, and have gone into various professional, either graduate programs or right into the field. There's a person on our board who's really been in it for longevity since its founding almost 40 years ago. And Terry Gibbs has far more, can give you the larger list. For any of those interested that hear this, we will get that material to you of
Oh,
what
wow,
the
great.
impacts have been. But I would say what I've seen is the expansion of our newsletter, of reader interaction, dialogue, um, public programs. We did a public program and a panel for Target Corporation, which is headquartered here. We're doing some op-ed pieces. Again, they're not totally easy to measure, that educational piece.
Sure. Yeah.
But on the collaborative pieces in the state legislature, like we just talked about, there's been several others that have impacted in places way outside of our headquarters in Minneapolis, but have impacted some foreign governments. There's been some UN proposals that have been incorporated. And again, best that I don't overly generalize. Those would be interested. I'll be happy to get a definitive list from my friend and our board president, one of the founders, Terry Gibbs.
Right, that's very exciting. So so let's say, Brian, I'm a 17-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be 18 in this summer, let's say. And you know, I'm worried about the future of humanity. I'm worried about my senior year. I'd like to do some kind of an internship. And boy, if I could just do something to save the planet, save the environment, maybe this is something I'd like to do. What would you advise a young man, a young woman at 17, like who wants to do something for the well, to save the planet? What would be your recommendation?
I probably would try 3 or 4 possible resources that would network them. I definitely would suggest they talk with, if they're a congregational member, if not, we'll go to 2. I would talk to ministers, priests, rabbis, imams, etc., about who in the congregation is a professional in the field or is active in one of the not-for-profits in their community.
Yeah.
I think second is I would talk to their local elected representative, whether it's city council, state government, or Congress. I would Google number 3, what's going on with nationally, which is, in my opinion, disastrous.
Yeah.
So they understand the threat to what has been instituted or funded on the national level. Not getting into politics, getting into policy and program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would check the UN also. Summer programs. There is a lot going on, a lot of areas to explore, and to get a sense for those that are committed to the work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, let's take that first one that you mentioned with a congregation, let's say,
Yes.
whatever ilk. what responsibilities do you think that religious organizations have to their congregation and to the planet to advocate for the planet?
Well, thank you for that question because we go through in our congregation the Jewish New Year of various
Hmm.
holidays that
Hmm.
are dedicated to really treating the earth the way we would like to be treated.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The golden
Uh,
rule extended to the planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have enough holidays and
Hmm.
more importantly, enough reference in
Hmm.
our various scripture and interpretations and even modern authors that come out of our tradition of how they lift up the importance of living in some kind of alignment, collaboration
Hmm.
um, with all aspects of the
Hmm.
earth, so we don't in it unintentionally or by self-aggrandizement degrade the earth.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
would definitely, and since the Abrahamic faiths
Mhm.
emanate from, the one that I'm particularly a member of,
Hmm.
you'll find plenty of references in Christianity and Islam. As
Hmm.
far as the other faiths, I think it's important to do a little Googling and talk to your
Hmm.
spiritual leaders of respect and trust to
Hmm.
get the references
Hmm.
and take a look at how well that tradition has been aligned or
Hmm.
been in sync,
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
commitments, or when it has been in effect um, taken advantage of
Hmm.
by other forces
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and been co-opted.
Yeah, no, excellent. It's so funny the timing, Brian, because just last night we had an event in Newtown that we called the Flowers of One Garden Festival. And it wasn't the first one, we've had several of them. And it's just getting people from as many different backgrounds together as possible, just to enjoy the beauty of our diversity and, have a respite from the insanity. But one of the things we talked about, and by the way, it was just so uplifting. But one of the things we talked about last night is that the unity is really important, but it's not the end. It's the engine, right? You
Yes,
need you need the unity to then do
yes,
something. And
yes.
I think what the next one, I think I'm going to ask the group, what environmental topic can we focus on to maybe as this kind of interfaith, interracial, international
Before
group?
you get to that step,
Hmm.
I thought we had a 16 different organizations
Hmm.
of a climate action fair.
Ah,
And
action fair.
so organizations that are very local to state to national, we invited. So they set up their table, they brought their,
Wow.
their trifolds, their literature, and it was an exploratory fair for youth and adults to check out what they were about and to hear what particular environmental problems they were committed to. And
What a
also
great idea.
so from that fair, not only did more people of the congregation become informed, I
Hmm.
got in touch with the person who deals with lead certification.
Hmm.
And it just so happened um, a couple people had worked for several years, and our temple has been gold lead certified. It's one of
Wow.
the oldest buildings anywhere that's gone through the rigorous
Hmm.
criteria, and then it's
Wow.
ongoing. So,
Interesting.
it's like any profession. Once you finally meet all the criteria to be accepted in practice,
Hmm.
there is, a continuation of standards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're hooked into the lead. Well, this guy told us, "Oh, I do this as a profession." So I
Hmm.
referred him to the people that are dealing with the ongoing criteria to recertify us.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of interaction that
Hmm.
occurred from people, and of course, that had gone back to the relationship
Yeah. Yeah.
of, being friendly enough to say, so what brings you to this table?
Yeah,
Very
right.
simple questions.
Hmm.
And we wove it into um, various ways of resourcing
Hmm.
and contributing. But there are so many ways, and I'd be happy if any of the listeners would like to email me. Um, Let us know where
We
you're
will put your
living.
link below.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, Brian,
and
that's
and
exciting.
and and we'll be happy to
Yeah.
connect in conversation and see if we can be a resource for your interests. Now,
Climate action
John, I
Yeah.
know time is getting late and you wanted to hit we call it anti-bias rather than anti-Semitism because our notion is we didn't, yeah, one could make the case that the surge in anti-bias of speech, behavior, and acting out is in a huge uptick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no doubt the Jewish community has been one of the more,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Targeted.
targets.
Yeah.
But there have been Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus. We're not the only one.
Right.
It's not just religious targets, it could be ethnicity targets.
Right. That's right.
So it just so happens we're initiating through Minnesota Multi-Faith Network, which I am involved with, a collaborative anti-bias um, project. And our notion, not to be grandiose, is we thought we know how um, how pushed and stressed the professionals in our state are that are members of various anti-discrimination organizations within faith institutions.
Hmm.
So the notion was, given we have congregations throughout the state,
Mhm.
way beyond the Abrahamic, but also,
Mhm.
a nice sample of
Mhm.
world congregations within the state. We thought we better explore with the professionals and see what a volunteer statewide interreligious group
Hmm.
could do to support the work they do.
Yeah.
So we're in the midst of that right now. And if any others are looking for that kind of collaborative work, because by no stretch, the professionals, and there's a lot that various entities around the country, in our opinion, are approaching it not as a problem with specific targets that need attention accordingly, both in relearning, um, you know, um, belief systems that have been distorted and
Yeah.
used as a way to scapegoat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a huge project.
Yeah.
We are very um, aware that whatever amount of people and faith leaders and volunteers we get to support more than we're already doing, we're also assessing how much congregations are supporting the efforts.
Hmm.
So we're trying to do this openly and with where it is on the ground.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So critically important. And this is why Mondays for the podcast is all about interfaith activities. So at the very least, if I know a Jew, if I know a Muslim, if I know a Buddhist, and I know a little bit about their scripture and their history, I'm much less liable to be hoodwinked by someone who's trying to tell me I need to hate that person.
Yes.
So at the very least, it's kind of an inoculation against bias. But on the good side, it enriches my life. I'm enriched by knowing about
Absolutely.
someone else's
I mean,
tradition.
we both had that at the parliament. We've had it many times before and
Yeah.
since. And breaking down these
Mm.
solo communities
Hmm.
and beginning the process where we are sampling each other's unique humanness
Yeah.
and dignity, I think is at the heart of what you're about. And I'm not paid to give you this promotion. Okay.
But
But but I said before we went on, I had to get this in. You can see all the correspondence and I wanted to grasp seriously what your project was about and your background and what you're bringing to it. And I distinctly remember this is we're at a time all hands on deck. I'm
Oh, yeah.
quoting John, okay?
Mhm.
And I hope this whole project elevates more involvement,
Mhm.
more thoughtful learning,
Mhm.
and able to stand up for each other when
Mhm.
it clearly is based on scapegoating
Yep.
and internalized anger
Yep.
that gets
Ignorance.
projected out
Yep.
to the other. We
Yep.
need, we don't need others. We need each other.
Well said, Brian. That's it.
So
That's it. There's the healing of the heart of America right there. You just said it. Yeah, and it's a perennial truth. It takes different forms with different generations, and our generation is stuck with a particularly pernicious
yes,
form of this. And you said, it's all hands on deck. Brian, I'm going to ask you if you'd be willing to come back again and just talk about any one of these topics in more detail, or if you want to bring somebody with you who, because there's several things we did today. We talked theoretically about some of the underpinnings, but I kind of pushed you on the process a little bit as well, because I want people to see that it's not just pie in the sky, bumper stickers beliefs. People need to know how to get active and how to form community. And you've got deep roots there. And so I'm sure as soon as we get off with this conversation, you're going to think of 10 things of, and so I want to give you space for that. And we won't take a year and a half to get that next one to happen.
I look forward to it. And I think you should bring in the summit coming up and the other ways to connect. And again, you didn't pay me for this one either. I didn't even have it on my mind that I was going to do a promotion, but you've
Yeah,
been so modest about not sharing that piece, at least in this format today. I think people that look at separate ones and may not look at the series should want to have that in the closing remarks.
yeah.
So
No,
as they
thank,
say in Zoom land, I give you the floor back.
Thanks, Brian. Well, and just knowing that, I hear you, Brian, and I hear, a lifetime of moral commitment and compassionate commitment, the one mitzvah after another. And your life has been one big mitzvah, and I'm just very, very grateful to know you. And I think we'll call it a day with that. And I want to thank Brian Zakem for taking the time, and count on coming back.
I'll be happy to.
All
And
right.
I'm looking forward to the summit and all the work that comes out of this. And the last thing I need to share is we need to link up with all the other mini movements out there.
Yep.
Because it truly is, in your words, all hands on deck.
All hands on deck.
Good
Yep.
people we can trust. Let's bring them into the energy and the knowledge and the skills that, because I think the program has been laid out by you and your colleagues is an important one, and we should test it right up to the limit to see how it
Yep.
contributes.
Just push and push and push.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks,
You're a
John.
bench. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of E Pluribus Unum, from many one, where we explore new visions of unity for the country. E Pluribus Unum is brought to you by Healing the Heart of America, where every day there's a new theme, and if it's Wednesday, it's E Pluribus Unum. I'm your host, Dr. John Woodall, reminding you we need each other.